We all knew it was going to happen, but it finally did. Jaxson Dart is officially coming back to Ole Miss. That is an absolutely massive, major piece. We'll tell you about it right after this. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran of the national media with Yahoo Sports. Also did a little bit of time at WSMV in Nashville. Thanks for joining me today. Today on the show, we will tell you what Jaxson Dart's decision to return to Ole Miss means for the Rebels, and it actually means a huge amount. As I mentioned, I'm Stephen Willis, and the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and YouTube. Thank you very much for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. And a special hello to the everydayers that make the show exactly what it is. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150. If your team wins, visit FanDuel.com to get started. Jaxson Dart is officially coming back to the Ole Miss Rebels for his senior year. We talked about it. We've been talking about it like it was a foregone conclusion for weeks now, but it has finally happened officially. Jaxson Dart kind of deserved to announce that himself, to have his moment, to release that, all of that stuff. He's coming back. What does that mean? Well, for Jaxson Dart, let's talk about for Jaxson Dart for a second. This is going to be a little bit of a stream of consciousness type podcast because I'm getting ready to, record this and watch the playoff games and all of that. So I'm very thankful that Jaxson Dart decided to do this because everybody has a lot of thoughts on Jaxson Dart. And I'm going to start with this. This is my ranking of quarterbacks currently at Ole Miss all time. The all-time rankings of quarterbacks. You have number one, you have Eli Manning. Number two, you have Jaxson Dart. Number three, Archie Manning. Number four, Chad Kelly. Number five, Matt Corral. Number six, Bo Wallace. Let me tell you my thinking on that one real quick. For starters, if you need to get in the top two, you have to do something special. You have to do something that's never been done. Eli Manning won 7 SEC games as a quarterback, has a Cotton Bowl win, won 10 games at Ole Miss when you didn't win 10 games at Ole Miss. That is what Eli Manning did. His numbers are in the rafters for a reason. Jaxson Dart gets on that list because the win in the Peach Bowl, winning 11 games in a season that's never been done at Ole Miss, and he is in position after next year to break every meaningful passing record other than maybe passing touchdowns in Ole Miss history, making him in the argument for greatest of all time. So that's why Jaxson Dart is being placed at number two. Number three, Archie Manning. There's a lot of PR, but he did have a Sugar Bowl win. Number four, you have Chad Kelly, who has a Sugar Bowl win, but he only played like 16 games. So you can't put him up too high. Number five, Matt Corral. He lost the NY6 game, but he did win 10 games in a season. And then you have Bo Wallace, who got to 9 wins in the season and lost the Peach Bowl. That is my rationale for those 6 quarterbacks. So Jaxson Dart coming back to school, he has a chance to leave a legacy to where he is the number one quarterback in the history of Ole Miss. And I don't care what you think about Jaxson Dart as a player right now. Everybody is such a polarizing figure. But if you just look at the numbers, he's one of 3 quarterbacks in Ole Miss history right now with over 5,000 yards passing and over 1,000 yards rushing for a career. He's going to shatter both of those records. Matt Corral was on that list as well. But you can see exactly what is ahead of Jaxson Dart for his own personal legacy at Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a school that has been known for the Mannings and not much else at the quarterback position. They've developed a wide receiver. A couple of good players would come out here and there, but mainly everybody knows Ole Miss because of the Mannings. That's changing. Matt Corral leading to Jaxson Dart leading to whichever one the next quarterback is on this assembling line of players is going to be a major key. The quarterback situation is going. The running back room is being built. Lane Kiffin is doing a fantastic job of just building talent in this room. And maybe the beneficiary of that talent is Jaxson Dart, but Jaxson Dart is the beneficiary of that talent. I don't necessarily care if Jaxson Dart's just like the first A.J. McCarron that has come through Ole Miss. He's going to have the numbers and the accolades unlike any other before him. Archie Manning, he did a lot of really great things for the 1960s. He was a type player that 1960s teams did not see. He was a big, strong quarterback that could run the football quite a bit. His numbers weren't particularly great, but the scheme did not match his talent. And that's the only reason that Archie Manning is on this list is because of talent. Because if it becomes a numbers competition, he won't win it. But Archie Manning, because of his error, he ended up on the podium for the Heisman Trophy. Eli Manning won the Maxwell, which is the trophy beside the Heisman for the best player in college football. That's the reason Eli Manning is where he is on my list. But Jaxson Dart has a chance to eclipse both of those and kind of become the face a little bit of this Ole Miss program, because for the next 9 months, national media is going to be talking about how good Ole Miss is. Going to be talking about all that stuff. Offensively, what they look like. Defensively, all the players that are coming in. And Jaxson Dart is going to be the beneficiary of being the face of that. Now, whenever we come back, we're going to talk about where he sits on the Heisman shortlist, what this means for the team, and what this means for Ole Miss. We'll have that coming up in just a second. But right now, I do want to say thanks again for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day. We're just getting started. Dart will be on the Heisman shortlist for 2024, and there's no ceiling for this team right now. I know this is absolutely weird, and Ole Miss fans are going to be uncomfortable hearing this, but there is no ceiling on this football team for 2024. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, and there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you just place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays, or you can find bets in the new Explore tab, and you have a parlay hub, and you can make the parlay and go in there, and you can find the popular parlays that are on the list and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make the first bet a layup. FanDuel, it's an official partner of the NFL. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. Subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. I do want to thank everybody for tuning in. We are closing in on 6,000 subscribers. Please go over there and subscribe to that. If we hit 6,000, we will start the ability to be able to do remote type shows. That is our goal. I've already got the equipment for it. We're going to set up and start doing that after we hit 6,000. I think we're about 90 or so away from that, maybe 80 at this point. But once we hit 6,000, we are going to do that as well. Now, the Heisman short list have been coming out over, the last 2 or 3 weeks, and Jaxson Dart's name has firmly been on it. Drew Aller's name was on it too, but so take it for what it's worth. But everybody is considering what Jaxson Dart can do moving forward. And with having 25 for 40, something like that ballpark, 370 yards passing, 3 touchdowns against the top 10 team. The only game on national TV, everybody expecting Ole Miss to kind of make a step, and they did. Jaxson Dart's going to be the beneficiary of that going into 2024. Mike Detillier on the Bo Bounds show talked about Jaxson Dart and wanted him to come back to school, which Jaxson inevitably did, but said this quite interesting. Jaxson Dart was the player that he thought could have a Jaden Daniels type improvement from his junior to his senior year. And if that happens, Ole Miss's offense could be pretty unstoppable. Now, in the Peach Bowl, you were playing against the number one defense. And yes, I get there were some opt-outs on that. But if Penn State had everybody, they weren't stopping Ole Miss that day because Ole Miss was doing the stuff that makes them unstoppable. Caden Lee, who had like 50 snaps all season, was basically uncoverable by the Penn State Nittany Lions. So don't give me opt-outs and all of that. You were schemed up, and your scheme was schemed up, and Ole Miss took advantage of that. But Jaxson Dart saw that. He played the quick game, got it going. You saw him use the whole field, every single quadrant. He varied the tempo of his passing game from 1-step to 3-step to 5-step type drops. You have a situation where everything was going to be used, and Penn State could not be right. If Penn State wanted to come up and just attack to where they were running through the run, because this is the secret to what Penn State was doing defensively, and this is why they were so good. So much of what they did was blitzing through the run to the pass, handling the run, taking care of the back on your way through, and then going to the quarterback. Well, that couldn't happen in that situation because Ole Miss just had better players on the outside. And in the Big Ten, you look at, as I record this, Tennessee is using tempo to their advantage against Iowa. And really interesting type stuff of what could happen offensively. Jaxson Dart coming back to school is going to take that tempo and everything to another level. The growth that Jaxson Dart went from year one to year two, because remember in year one, he got here in late February, had a quick rushed spring where he couldn't pick necessarily everything up, had a weird quarterback competition in fall, if everybody remembers, didn't win the job outright until week 4. And at the end of the season, the weird Lane Kiffin Auburn stuff type happened and kind of derailed that a little bit as well. And everybody was like, okay, Jaxson, he's not that dude. He's just not that dude. We all remember what the spring game, Jackson's first spring game looked like, and it was so rough. You just felt genuinely bad for the kid. But that kid worked, really worked at it. In year 1 to year 2, you saw somebody take their interceptions from 11 to about 5. Touchdowns went up. And the command of the offense, whenever it was a tight game in the fourth quarter, Ole Miss was not losing the game. Jaxson willed the team to win football games all through the season against any manner of teams. His competitiveness is, I mean, I would say Corral-esque, but I think he's more competitive than Matt Corral. And Matt Corral was a competitive dude. So if Jaxson Dart can make the jump he made from year 1 to year 2, from year 2 to year 3, you have a situation where Ole Miss's offense is just basically going to be unstoppable. It's like Walter Nolan said in his article, the only team that is going to stop Ole Miss is Ole Miss. Now, there's still some stuff going on in the transfer portal right now. We'll talk about that in the next segment a little bit. We'll talk about what this means to Ole Miss. But don't back away from the talk of Ole Miss being in the top 5. Do not back away from Jaxson Dart's talk of being on the Heisman shortlist. Ole Miss belongs there. Trey Harris is potentially the best wide receiver in college football. Just put up his numbers right here. Trey Harris, 54 catches, 985 yards, and 8 touchdowns. And that was when he missed nearly a quarter of the season. He got hurt on the first drive against Tulane. He played about 1 series against Alabama, and then he kind of slowly came back in. By the end of the season, he was really good. And these numbers, he averaged almost 20 yards a catch. He was an explosive game breaker. He was a contested catch maker. He was a ball winner. And not only that, he just outmanned people. And this was a transfer from Louisiana Tech last year. Now he has a chance to get right. He rooms with Jaxson Dart on the road. They do complement each other very well. And I think he is Jackson's first choice when looking down the field. Now, we have Jordan Watkins. Caden Lee, like I said, 50 snaps all season. He was basically uncoverable against Penn State. Deion Smith is going to come in. Juice Wells is going to come in. Caden Prieskorn, who was the Peach Bowl offensive MVP, is coming back with 10 catches for 135 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a 2-point conversion. And Quinshon Judkins. We're still waiting on Quinshon. Quinshon ended up with 271 yards, 1,158 yards. 271 carries, 15 touchdowns. Much like Jaxson Dart, he has a chance to have every meaningful record at Ole Miss by the time he leaves. He has probably somewhere in the ballpark of about 2,700 yards, 2,800 yards right now. The school record, I think, is like 33 or 34. So he could break this by the non-conference slate. Now, we talked about before the season about Quinshon Judkins. And we said he could have a year that was like 1,200 yards, but he could be more effective and a better running back in year 2 than he was in year 1. And a lot of this is because they're throwing the ball much more. They were kind of force feeding the run last year. He ended up with 1,600 yards or something like that, leading one of the leaders in the nation. This year, they ran the ball an awful lot, but they threw the ball more. The run-pass ratio, I don't know what exactly was, but last year it was north of 70% run to pass. This year was probably in the neighborhood of 60 to 65% run to pass. And if that happens, his yards are going to go down. Plus, everybody saw at the end of last season the engage 8s type stuff to where you blitz the run to get to the passer. Teams started doing that, so Ole Miss had to figure out what was going on. And when Caden Prieskorn got healthy, all of a sudden Quinshon really had a good run of things. But really good athletes coming back all over the place. And we'll talk about the ones coming in the next segment, what this coming back means for Ole Miss, and all of that stuff. And we're getting ready over the next week to talk about transfer portal. I don't know if I'm going to talk about transfer portal today, just because we have other stuff coming up. I think a short visit window is about to happen to where they lift it up to where people that are mid-year transfers can come in and visit real quick before they shut it down, and they'll come in later. This is the time of year, honestly, though, that Ole Miss has a little bit of an advantage in the transfer portal, and that is because of their calendar. Ole Miss has until like February 2nd to get transfers into school for the start of spring semester. That's the last drop ad date. Jaxson Dart, Michael Trigg, those guys came in late as well. So this is the month where a little bit of action happens. There's some schools, they're going to start January 10th or something like that, and their drop ad date is going to be like January 17th. Ole Miss doesn't have that issue as well. So should be interesting. Still more to come on Locked On Ole Miss, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Ole Miss has the most important piece for 2024, but the transfer portal is still going. And what does this mean for Ole Miss and all of that in January? Indeed. So stick around. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day, and shout out to the everydayers. Locked On has the first national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 stream channel. Be part of history. So Jaxson Dart coming back to school. Most important piece. Everybody assumed it was going to happen. It was nice that it did happen, that this is behind us and all of that. Now, the next window would be like the transfer portal, which is slated to close, I don't know, Tuesday or Wednesday, one of those two. Whenever that happens, and if Quinshon Judkins is still not in the transfer portal, you'll know exactly what's happening there. I'm expecting Quinshon to announce at some point as well. So we'll see exactly how that goes. Jaxson Dart coming back to Ole Miss. What does that mean for Ole Miss? Because we talked about the media hyping up Ole Miss just to a ridiculous amount going into the fall season. And that is going to happen. You're going to have a top 5 Ole Miss team. You're going to have an Ole Miss team that doesn't play Alabama. LSU does not look great in the ReliaQuest Bowl today. And you can see exactly how things are going to be for Ole Miss. And a large part of that is Jaxson Dart. And Walker Howard's a really good quarterback. I would be okay with Walker Howard taking snaps. I'd be okay with Austin Simmons taking snaps. They both have insanely high ceilings. But if they took over next year, it would be an inexperienced quarterback, and you would always have going into it that you would have to do that Michael Spurlock feeling from 2004 after Eli left, if anybody can remember that. And the inexperience factor would pop in and stuff like that. You would need to see it. It would become a show me type situation. Well, we have seen it with Jaxson Dart. Jaxson Dart, like I said yesterday, is somewhere around 2-3 or 3-2. Might be 3-2. Might be 3-3. I'm not exactly sure what the record is in there, but against top 13 teams that he's played against, he has a victory over number 7 Kentucky, a victory over number 10 Penn State, and a victory over number 13 LSU. I don't necessarily care how they finish, but those wins actually happen. Those were real things. Ole Miss lost to Alabama twice with Jaxson Dart, including one play in Oxford where the ball was in the air to beat Alabama. And he lost to Georgia. So I think it was 2 losses to Alabama and maybe a loss to Georgia as far as top 10 level teams that Ole Miss and Jaxson Dart lost to. This is a successful guy who deserves all the credit that he's getting. He's earned the right to announce this way, and he's earned the right to be the face of the program going into 2024. SEC Media Days with Quinshon Judkins, Jaxson Dart, and I don't know somebody on defense that you want to bring, maybe JJ Pegues over as a defender going to see what's going on. I think those will be interesting pieces. Ole Miss has a chance going into next season to have 11 teams that you just look on the schedule when you're doing W's and L's. 11 of them could be W's if you just take what's going on. Only one would be a toss-up. I don't know if one guaranteed L is going to be on Ole Miss's schedule next year. I think it is going to be literally 10 to 11 W's and 1 to 2 toss-ups is the way Ole Miss's schedule is going to shape up next season. Now, will it be easy? No, never is. And you're always one injury or something away from everything changing. But with Jaxson Dart coming back to school, I think it's safe to say that Ole Miss fans, they should get hyped up. If you're not going to get excited now, you're not going to get excited at all. And some people just can't get excited. Some people are but fans. Hey, Jaxson Dart threw for 370 yards in the Peach Bowl. Yeah, but Penn State's top corner was out of the game. Those type fans actually exist, and you just can't care what they think. Be excited, have fun, and have all the fun you need because they're doing what they need to do to kind of have fun as well. But fans exist in every single fan base, and you just need to get past them. The media completely jacked up. David Eckert and Michael Katz on Twitter. They're both excellent follows on Twitter. They're thinking top 5 Ole Miss team going into next season. They're thinking Jaxson Dart is a dark horse, not even a dark horse, just on the short list for the Heisman. Quinshon Judkins, who's going to break every single record that Ole Miss has and is potentially the best running back in college football, is back in the backfield. Trey Harris, who potentially could be the best wide receiver in college football, is back out at wide receiver, and you have a tight end. You saw in the Peach Bowl, everybody saw what Caden Prieskorn can bring whenever he's healthy. Now, you add that group with a defense that is getting built. Defensive line wise, Penn State ran the ball early on that first drive before Ole Miss figured out what they need to do, because Pete Golding's a really smart defensive coordinator, by the way. Once he figured out what they were doing, they just stopped it. Second and third quarter, it was just Penn State's offense was just sad. And you're going to replace that defensive line. Like Isaac Ukwu played very well. Nothing against Isaac. But then you have J.J. McGee, Xavion Harris, and Jared Ivey, all three of which are coming back. Now you're adding to those three Walter Nolan, Princely Amon-Mielen, and Tyler Barron. And your defensive line just went from middle of the pack in the Southeastern Conference to potentially the best defensive line in the Southeastern Conference. You're going to bring in one of the best pass rushers in the country. You're going to be bringing in one of the best defensive linemen in the country to put next to your freak athletic defensive lineman that you have. And then Jared Ivey and Tyler Barron, they can go with best two players out of the three, and they can be a pretty dominant unit. I'm pretty fired up. The linebacker played. I think TJ Dudley is going to step back. He impressed me in the Peach Bowl. He really did. And then you have Chris Paul, who was the best linebacker in the transfer portal. You know, Tamari McDonald, Taz Nicholson, DeCameron Richardson, Key Lawrence, those guys, Louis Moore as secondary pieces on the field, all of which are SEC level players that were starters coming over to potentially play defense for Ole Miss. And there's still a couple of pieces that we're waiting to see if they come back. We're waiting to find out about John Saunders. John Saunders can play an extra year of football, I think. And a couple of players like that to where they can stack the cupboard even a little bit more. But the most important piece was named. Yesterday, when Jaxson Dart admitted that he was coming back, that was the moment where Ole Miss fans could start to really believe about 2024. That was the confirmation. And Jaxson had earned the right to do this on New Year's Day and all of that stuff. He's earned that. He's too good of a player not to have earned that. Enjoy this, Rebel fans. Enjoy this for the next 9 months. Enjoy football season. Do what you need to do. Should be really interesting indeed. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. Every day or tomorrow, we will kind of start going to the transfer portal. There's a couple of names that are popping up. I didn't want to talk about them today. We will talk about them tomorrow. For your second listen, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover each and every league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 stream channel. For those of you on YouTube, we'll send you the right now. Anyway, hotty toddy. Happy New Year.